There's a woman I want you to think about. She's 53 years old. Her name is Margaret. And every Sunday for the past 41 years, Margaret has sat in the same pew, third row from the back, left side, near the window. She knows every hymn by heart. She's read her Bible cover to cover 11 times. She volunteers at the food pantry. She prays every morning at 6 o'clock, every evening at 9. She has done everything right. And Margaret is absolutely miserable. She won't tell you that, of course. She smiles. She says, blessed when people ask how she's doing. But at night, when the house is quiet and her husband is asleep, Margaret lies awake and stares at the ceiling and wonders why God feels so far away. Why, after 4 decades of devotion, she still feels this gnawing emptiness, this quiet desperation she can't name. She's begun to wonder if something is wrong with her, if she's not praying hard enough, not believing hard enough, not good enough. She's begun to wonder if God is punishing her for something she can't remember doing. You know this feeling. Maybe not in a church, maybe not with Margaret's particulars, but you know what it's like to do everything you were told to do and still feel like you're missing something essential, something everyone else seems to have figured out. Here's what I want to suggest to you today, and I want you to really hear this, because it might change everything. What if the God you've been searching for, what if the God you've been praying to, begging, negotiating with, trying to please, trying to appease, what if that God doesn't exist? Not because there is no God, but because the God you were taught about, the God out there, somewhere, watching, judging, keeping score, is a tragic case of mistaken identity. What if the brutal truth is this? You've been looking in the wrong direction your entire life. You've been trying to connect with something you were never disconnected from. You've been seeking approval from a source that has never, not for one instant, withheld its love from you. What if the reason Margaret feels so far from God is because she's been taught to look everywhere except the one place God has always been? Let's talk about what most of us were taught, because this is where the confusion begins. Most of us, whether we grew up religious or not, absorbed a very particular idea about what God is. God is a being, a personality, someone. God is up there, out there, separate from us. God created the universe and then stepped back to observe it. God watches what we do. God judges what we do. God rewards the good and punishes the wicked, if not in this life, then in the next. God is essentially a very powerful person with opinions about your behavior. Now, I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. I'm not here to attack anyone's faith or tell you what to believe. That's not my place. And frankly, it's not my interest. But I am here to ask you a question that might be uncomfortable. Has that version of God brought you peace? Not fleeting peace, not the temporary relief of believing you've done something right. I mean deep, unshakable, permanent peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. The kind of peace that remains when everything falls apart. Because here's what I've observed in my own life and in the lives of thousands of people I've encountered over the years. The people who carry around that image of God, God as the cosmic judge, God as the scorekeeper, God as the distant father who might love you if you perform well enough, those people are almost never at peace. They're anxious. They're afraid. They're constantly measuring themselves against standards they can never quite meet. They live in perpetual spiritual insufficiency. And the tragedy is, they think that's what faith is supposed to feel like. Think about this for a moment. Think about your relationship with this God you've been taught about. Is it a relationship of love? Or is it a relationship of fear dressed up as love? Do you approach God the way you'd approach someone who adores you unconditionally? Or do you approach God the way you'd approach a stern authority figure who might be disappointed in you? When you pray, are you communing or are you performing? When you make a mistake, do you feel held or do you feel abandoned? These are important questions because the quality of your spiritual life depends entirely on your understanding of what God actually is. I want to tell you about a shift that happened in my own understanding. And this shift didn't come from a book, although books help point the way. It came from a moment of utter desperation. I was in my 30s. I had achieved everything I thought I was supposed to achieve. I had the degrees, the career, the family, the house, the respect of my colleagues. From the outside, my life looked exactly like success was supposed to look. And I was dying inside. Not physically, but spiritually, emotionally, I was suffocating. I felt disconnected from everything, including myself. Especially myself. I would go through entire days feeling like I was watching my life from behind glass. Present but not there. Functioning but not alive. And I prayed. Oh, how I prayed. I prayed the way I'd been taught to pray. I asked God to help me, to fix me, to show me what I was doing wrong, to tell me what I needed to do to feel okay. Nothing. Silence. For months. Nothing. And then one night I was sitting alone in my study and I wasn't praying anymore. I had given up on praying. I was just sitting there, exhausted, empty, defeated. And in that emptiness, something happened. I can't describe it adequately with words. Language fails here. But it was as if for just a moment, the wall I'd been pushing against my entire life simply dissolved. And what I experienced wasn't God coming to me from somewhere else. It was the sudden, shocking realization that there was no somewhere else. What I'd been searching for was what was doing the searching. The awareness that was looking for God was God. Not Wayne, not the personality, the ego, the collection of thoughts and preferences and fears I'd always identified as me, but the awareness underneath all that. The consciousness that was aware of Wayne. The presence that was present before Wayne had a name, before Wayne had a story, before Wayne had any idea what he was supposed to be or do or achieve. That was God. That had always been God. And I had spent my entire life looking everywhere except there. Now, I want to be very careful here, because what I'm saying can easily be misunderstood. I'm not saying you are God in the sense that your ego is divine. I'm not saying your personality is God. I'm not saying your thoughts, your preferences, your opinions, your desires. I'm not saying any of that is God. That would be absurd and dangerous. And it would lead to exactly the kind of spiritual narcissism that gives this entire conversation a bad name. What I'm saying is something much more subtle and much more profound. You are not your thoughts. You are not your personality. You are not your story, your history, your achievements, your failures. You are not your body, although you have one. You are not your mind, although you use one. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. And that awareness, that pure, unchanging, ever-present awareness, that is what every mystic, every saint, every genuine spiritual teacher has been pointing to when they use the word God. This is the brutal truth that no church will tell you, not because they're hiding it from you, but because most churches don't know it themselves. They've inherited a theology that places God outside of you, above you, beyond you, a theology that makes you small and God big, a theology that keeps you searching, seeking, striving, never arriving. But the mystics knew. The ones who went deep enough, they always came back with the same message. The kingdom of God is within you. Jesus said that. It's right there in Luke 17:21. Within you. Not above you, not beyond you, not in a building, not in a book, not in a ritual. Within you. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46. Be still. Stop seeking. Stop striving. Stop performing. Just be still. And in that stillness, know. Not believe. Not hope. No. Meister Eckhart, the great Christian mystic, wrote, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me." The same eye, not two. One. This isn't New Age nonsense. This is the hidden heart of every genuine spiritual tradition. And it's been hidden in plain sight the whole time. Let me ask you something. And I want you to really consider this. Have you ever had a moment, maybe it was brief, maybe it lasted only a second, when you felt completely at peace, completely whole, a moment when there was no problem to solve, nothing missing, nothing to fix? Maybe it was in nature, a sunset that stopped your thoughts, a mountain that made your worries seem absurd, an ocean that reminded you how small your dramas really are. Maybe it was with another person. A moment of genuine connection when all the walls came down and you felt, just for an instant, that you and this other person were not really separate at all. Maybe it was with a child, a baby sleeping in your arms. And for a moment, you weren't thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. You were just there, present, complete. What was happening in those moments? I'll tell you what wasn't happening. You weren't earning it. You weren't achieving it. You weren't good enough to deserve it. You simply stopped. You stopped thinking. You stopped seeking. You stopped being somewhere else in your mind. And in that stopping, what you really are became apparent. Peace didn't come to you from outside. Peace was revealed as what you are when you stopped covering it up with mental noise. God didn't visit you. God was recognized as what was there all along. This is the mechanism that nobody explains. This is the how behind the what. Every spiritual practice that works, and there are many that work, every one of them works the same way. Not by connecting you to something external, but by quieting the mental noise that obscures what's already here. Prayer works when it stops your thoughts and opens you to presence. Meditation works when it stops your thoughts and opens you to presence. Contemplation, chanting, walking in nature, serving others, losing yourself in creative work, all of these work for the same reason. They interrupt the relentless mental commentary that keeps you identified with a small, separate, struggling self. And when that commentary pauses, even briefly, what remains is what the mystics call God. Think about what this means for your life. Really consider the implications. If God is not outside you, then you don't need to search. You need to stop searching. If God is not withholding anything from you, then you don't need to earn. You need to stop earning. If God is not judging you, then you don't need to perform. You need to stop performing. If God is what you already are at the deepest level, then the entire spiritual journey changes. It's no longer about getting somewhere. It's about recognizing where you already are. It's not about becoming something. It's about unbecoming everything you're not. This is why Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven belongs to children. Children haven't yet accumulated the layers of conditioning, the mental noise, the false identity that adults carry around. Children are naturally present, naturally alive, naturally connected to what is. We don't need to become something new. We need to become what we were before we were told we weren't enough. Pause with that for a moment. Let it land. You are not trying to become worthy of God's love. You are trying to stop believing you're not. You are not trying to earn your way to peace. You are trying to stop blocking the peace that's already here. You are not trying to find God. You are trying to stop pretending God is somewhere else. Here's what nobody talks about. Why is this so hard to accept? Why do we resist this message even when something in us recognizes its truth? Because the ego has no place in this understanding. The ego, that constructed sense of self, that collection of thoughts and beliefs and identities we've accumulated, the ego needs problems. The ego needs to seek. The ego needs a journey it can take credit for. If God is already here, already you, already present and available and complete, then the ego has nothing to do. And the ego would rather suffer than be unemployed. This is the great spiritual irony. The thing in you that wants to find God is the very thing preventing you from recognizing God. The seeker is the problem. Not because seeking is bad. Seeking is how we begin. We have to start somewhere, and most of us start with the assumption that what we're looking for is somewhere else. But at some point, the seeker has to be seen through. The searching has to stop. Not because you've found what you're looking for in the way the ego imagines finding something, but because you realize that finding and seeking and achieving and earning are all activities of the same mind that can never rest. And what you really are is not that mind. What you really are is the awareness in which that mind appears. The ocean doesn't seek water. It doesn't struggle to become wet. It already is what it would be looking for. You don't need to find God. You need to stop pretending you're something other than God expressing itself as you. Let me tell you about a man I met years ago. His name was Thomas. 74 years old, former minister. He'd spent 50 years preaching in churches across the country. Fire and brimstone. Sin and salvation. Heaven and hell. And at 74, Thomas told me he'd never felt God. Not once. Not in 50 years of ministry. He'd believed in God. He'd studied God. He'd dedicated his entire life to God. But he'd never felt what he was talking about. And he was terrified that when he died, there would be nothing. That he'd spent his entire life selling something he'd never actually possessed. We talked for hours that day. And at some point I asked him, Thomas, when you pray, who is aware of the praying? He looked at me like I was speaking another language. When you read scripture, who is aware of the reading? When you doubt, who is aware of the doubting? When you're afraid, who is aware of the fear? He sat with that for a long time. He sat with that. And then his eyes changed. Something shifted. Not in his theology, in his direct experience. That's been there the whole time, he said. That awareness. That's been there for 74 years. I was looking for it in ideas, in beliefs, in experiences. But it was doing the looking. Thomas wept that day. Not because he'd found something new, because he'd recognized something ancient, something that had never left him, something that couldn't leave him because it was him. He spent his remaining years in a completely different kind of peace. Not the peace of finally finding the right beliefs, the peace of no longer needing beliefs to be okay. So what does this mean practically? How do you actually live from this understanding? This is the question everyone asks, and it's the right question, because intellectual understanding changes nothing. Beliefs, even beautiful beliefs, are just more furniture in the mental room. What transforms a life is not what you know, it's what you are. And what you are cannot be changed by understanding it differently. It can only be recognized. But there are ways to support that recognition. There are practices that quiet the mind enough for truth to become self-evident. The first is simply this. Stop seeking. I don't mean stop growing. I don't mean stop learning. I don't mean settle for where you are. I mean stop seeking God as if God were somewhere else. Stop seeking peace as if peace were an achievement. Stop seeking yourself as if you were lost. You are not lost. You've never been lost. You've only been distracted. Distracted by thoughts. Distracted by problems. Distracted by the endless mental drama that pretends to be your life. Every time you catch yourself seeking, ask, who is seeking? Who is aware of this sense of lack? Who is present before the seeking begins? That who is what you're looking for. And you cannot find it because you are it. The second practice is even simpler. Be still. I don't mean physically still, although that can help. I mean internally still, thought-free, even if just for a moment. You don't have to meditate for hours. You don't have to achieve some exotic state of consciousness. You just have to stop, even for 30 seconds, even for 10 seconds. Stop and notice what is here when I'm not thinking. Not what thoughts say is here, not what beliefs claim is here, what is actually here, right now, in direct experience. Awareness, presence, being, that simple sense of I am that exists before you add anything to it. That is what the mystics mean by God. Not a concept, not a personality, but this living presence that you are, that everything is, that has never been absent and can never be absent, because it is the very space in which absence and presence both appear. The third practice is this. Question your thoughts about yourself. You carry around a self-image, a story about who you are, where you came from, what's wrong with you, what you need to fix, what you need to achieve before you can rest. That story is not you. It's a construction, a collection of memories and interpretations and secondhand opinions that you've mistaken for reality. Every time you feel separate from God, every time you feel unworthy, every time you feel like something essential is missing, notice that these are thoughts, stories, mental commentary, and then notice what's aware of these thoughts. Is that awareness suffering? Is that awareness separate? Is that awareness lacking anything? Or is it simply here, simply open, simply present, untouched by the drama that passes through it? The thoughts say you're not enough. The awareness that sees those thoughts has never believed them. Here's what changes when you begin to live from this understanding. You stop trying to get God's attention because you realize you are God's attention. You are how the divine attends to this moment, this place, this life. You stop trying to deserve love because you realize love is not a reward. Love is your nature. You cannot earn what you already are. You stop waiting for some future spiritual accomplishment because you realize the present moment is the only place God has ever been or could ever be. Not tomorrow, not when you're more evolved. Now, here, this breath. You stop using religion as a way to manage your fear of death because you recognize that what you really are was never born and cannot die. The body comes and goes. Thoughts come and go. Experiences come and go. But the awareness in which all of this appears, that's permanent. That's what continues. That's what you've always been. And perhaps most importantly, you stop using spirituality as just another way to improve your ego. Another credential. Another achievement. Another way to be better than others. The ego can corrupt anything. It can turn prayer into performance. It can turn meditation into competition. It can turn enlightenment into the ultimate spiritual trophy. But when you see through the ego, when you recognize that it's just another appearance in awareness, no more real than a cloud passing through the sky, then spirituality becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a path to something, but a recognition of what already is. I want to return to Margaret for a moment. The woman we began with, 41 years in the same pew, doing everything right, feeling nothing. What would I tell her? I would tell her that her emptiness is not a punishment. It's an invitation. It's life's way of saying, the path you're on leads nowhere. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because you've been looking in the wrong direction. I would tell her that God is not far away. God is closer than her next breath. God is the awareness reading these words right now, if she were here. I would tell her that all her years of seeking were not wasted. They brought her here, to this moment, to this recognition, to the end of a journey she never needed to take. And I would tell her to be still, to stop trying so hard, to let go of the effort and the striving and the desperate need to be good enough. Because she already is good enough. She was good enough before she sat in that pew the first time. She will be good enough after the last hymn is sung. Not because of anything she did or didn't do, but because her very existence is evidence of something the mind cannot grasp and the ego cannot accept. She is how the infinite experiences finitude. She is how the eternal plays at time. She is how God lives a human life. And so are you. The brutal truth about God is not that God is angry or distant or disappointed in you. The brutal truth is that God is here, now, as you, and you've been searching everywhere else. The brutal truth is that all you're seeking has been taking you away from what you seek. The brutal truth is that you've been standing in the ocean asking where the water is. But here's the beauty within the brutality. The moment you stop searching, you find. The moment you stop grasping, you receive. The moment you stop trying to become worthy, you recognize that worthiness was never the issue. Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to try something. Lie down, close your eyes, and instead of praying to something out there, instead of asking for something you think you need, instead of reciting words you learned from someone else, just be still. Feel the presence that has been with you every moment of your life. The awareness that was there when you were 5 years old. The awareness that was there on your best day and your worst day. The awareness that has never changed, never judged, never left. That's what people mean when they say God. Not a thought, not a belief, not a feeling. The awareness that's aware of thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. Stay there. Even if thoughts come, even if doubts come, even if it feels like nothing special is happening, because something is happening. Something has always been happening. You are happening. And you are far more than you have been led to believe. I'll leave you with this. You don't need to believe a single word I've said today. Belief is just another thought, another mental position, another piece of furniture in a room that's already too crowded. What I'm pointing to is before belief. It's what's here, whether you believe it or not, whether you understand it or not, whether you accept it or not. God is not a conclusion you reach at the end of an argument. God is what remains when all arguments end. Be still. And know, not with your mind, with your being. That knowing that is God knowing itself. And it has been happening through you your entire life. You just forgot to notice.